A Fox News alert now. Last hour, we alerted you to the growing attacks on Christians in Egypt. And moments ago, the State Department spoke out. It's a brand new hour of America Live. I'm Allison Camerata, in for Megyn Kelly. There are new protests again today, just 24 hours after a violent crackdown that left more than 500 people dead across the country. Things are relatively quiet at this hour. A curfew is still in effect and will remain so for the rest of the month. But earlier, we learned that under the cover of yesterday's violence, more than a dozen churches were reportedly burned. Christian businesses were ransacked, and Christians themselves were targeted for attack that seemed based solely on their religion. So here is State Department spokesperson Jen Psaki moments ago.
The United States strongly condemns all attacks and acts of violence and bloodshed across Egypt. We are outraged and deplore in the strongest terms the reprehensible attacks of the past few days against numerous Coptic Christian churches. We also condemn the recent attacks on public buildings, including police stations. There can be absolutely no place for such violence in Egypt, and we call on all of Egypt's leaders to condemn such attacks. These attacks risk further aggravating an already fragile atmosphere. The government has a responsibility to create an atmosphere where Egyptians can exercise their universal rights, including free assembly, expression, and media. Protesters also have a responsibility to exercise those rights peacefully, and those demonstrating peacefully should not be labeled terrorist. Just as we have over the past weeks, we urge all sides to immediately take utmost steps to calm the situation and avoid further loss of life or further injuries.
All right, so you heard the State Department there weigh in on the persecution. The president also remarked on the violence in Egypt a little earlier today. Senior White House Foreign Affairs correspondent Wendell Guller is traveling with the president today, and he joins us live from Martha's Vineyard. Wendell, what's the president saying?
Well, Allison, the most violent day in Egypt since the ouster of Hosni Mubarak pulled President Obama out of vacation mode and put him in front of cameras to condemn the military crackdown. Mr. Obama announced the U.S. will cancel a joint military exercise set for next month. And though he is still not ready to call the military takeover a coup, he suggests the Egyptian army is blowing its chance to put the country on a democratic path.
After the military's intervention several weeks ago, there remained a chance for reconciliation and an opportunity to pursue a democratic path. Instead, we've seen a more dangerous path taken through arbitrary arrests, a broad crackdown on Mr. Morsi's associations and supporters, and now, tragically, violence that's taken the lives of hundreds of people and wounded thousands more.
Mr. Obama stopped short of cutting off U.S. military aid, but with more than 500 people killed yesterday alone, he finds himself at a loss to exert U.S. influence. He called on protesters to be peaceful as well, but the majority of his criticism was aimed at the Egyptian military, and his critics in this country feel that puts him on the side of the Muslim Brotherhood.
The president has put his thumb down on the scale on the side of the Muslim Brotherhood. This criticism of the Egyptian government, I think, will resonate all over Egypt, and it will not do us any good.
Ambassador Bolton says the Brotherhood's attack on the military left 50 soldiers dead, and he says attacks on Coptic Christians have led 100,000 to flee the country. Allison?
All right, Wendell Guller, thanks so much for that update from Martha's Vineyard. So how did we get to this point in Egypt? Well, back on June 29th, more than 22 million Egyptians signed a petition calling for Mohamed Morsi to step down. The next day, large-scale demonstrations broke out, millions in the streets denouncing Morsi's government. Then on July 3rd, the army kicks Morsi out of office, detains him, and moves him to an undisclosed location. Then yesterday, reports of at least 525 people killed and close to 4,000 people hurt in a violent crackdown on pro-Morsi, pro-Muslim Brotherhood protesters.